Jeff Stulberg is here. He's at stulberglaw.com. He practices law out of San Luis Obispo. He's a personal injury attorney as well as criminal defense. He also works with general business law, and if somebody's done you wrong and you got to take him to court, you call Jeff. This whole thing, I was thinking about you this week because the fact that I've been hearing a lot of people saying if they didn't follow by the rules at their job, they would be fired. And apparently a lot of people think that NFL players, part of their job is they have to stand during the national anthem. I don't know if it's in their contracts or not. Can you actually put a stipulation in someone's contract that says you have to stand? I mean, this morning the president came out and said he wants to make it a rule. He wants Roger Goodell. Did you see this, Jeff? He wants to make Roger Goodell make this a rule. Him and Jeff Sessions, our attorney general, want to make this a rule that you have to stay. Listen, I no disrespect in any way, please, but we still have rights in this country, right, to be able to express ourselves in some way, shape, or form.
Well, first of all, this falls in the general area of employment law, but let me go back on free speech. I mean, there's a U.S. Supreme Court case that says burning the American flag is protected free speech, and that's from the U.S. Supreme Court. Most of us would agree that
burning a flag is worse than taking a knee.
Burning the flag is worse than taking a knee, and most of us would cringe if we saw somebody burning an American flag. But I mean, it's been settled for many years by the U.S. Supreme Court that speech, even that is uncomfortable speech, is protected. Now, then the question becomes in the workplace: what can an employer restrict and what can't they restrict? And I'm going to just be California specific for right now, but employers in California are actually very, very circumscribed on what they can say about what their employees do or say in terms of free speech outside the workplace. But this is specifically inside the workplace, what happens on the field when you're out there. These types of contracts are very, very specific as to behaviors that are and aren't acceptable. And even if you put in the contract, must stand and face flag during the national anthem, that clause could still theoretically be invalidated under California law. I can't talk about the rest of the state because I'm only an admitted lawyer in California, but could be invalidated under California as an unconscionable or illegal term to put in there. No court has ruled on that yet, and you don't know how they would come down. On the one hand, you have the freedom to contract. On the other hand, you don't. Now, the nexus that's always really important in these types of cases is the employer trying to restrict speech which is directly related to the performance of their job. For example, there'd be no question that PG&E could sanction a public information officer who spent his weekends standing outside Diablo Canyon with a sign saying, "Stop nuclear power now."
Yeah, that was a bad hiring choice.
Right, because that speech would be directly inconsistent with the goals of the business. Mm-hmm. The more tangential it becomes, and the farther, the more tangential it becomes, the more difficult it is for an employer under California law to restrict that speech. And there's a number of cases from the California Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals that stand on the side of the employee's right to that, and there's sections within the labor code that protect that. So it's really sort of interesting. Google is in sort of a pickle because everybody said, yay, Google, when Google fired the guy who made those outwardly white supremacist supportive comments after Charlottesville. Mm-hmm. And but that individual may ultimately end up suing Google, saying, hey, this was protected speech. It wasn't related to my work at Google. You may not like what I have to say, but I've got the right to say it, and there's no nexus between that and the performance of my job here as a data analyst or whatever it was. And it's an uncomfortable position, but that's the state of the law right now.
Yeah. I guess Google's theory on that would be, is that the cost of doing business from a PR standpoint? Because you don't want to have the face that you employ. You knowingly employ white supremacists working for your company. You know?
Sure, you make an assessment. It's on a company like that. But that's not making an assessment based upon are we going to win or lose this case potentially. It's a question of is it worth taking a principled stand on this, saying as a company, even if it costs us a few dollars, we're not going to tolerate this. And it's interesting because I'm one of the few lawyers in town that has representation of some businesses. I sort of their outside HR department, and handle their employment related issues and questions when they come up. But I also represent individual employees that have issues when it's not in conflict with some other representation.
So you're really good at understanding both sides.
Well, yeah,
from a legal standpoint.
I get a sense, and I read newsletters from colleagues, in firms that do both sides as well too. And so every time something comes out from a firm, from a big firm that is strictly an employee representing firm, or a law review article on the other side, you see both sides of the argument, and there's always a tension there. What is the line at which free speech becomes intolerable? Like, for example, free speech would not be if you gave somebody, one of the players, the microphone to go up and sing the national anthem, and the player said, "Flee for your lives, there's a bomb in the stadium." That would not clearly be protected speech.
What about within reason?
What about within most working environments? I would say a majority of people don't have contracts. They go to work. They sign up. They work somewhere. They get hired. They agree on their salary. They come to work. They punch their clock. Whatever they do, and they work with other people. And let's say they're in the break room and they're having a conversation, and somebody walks by and they find it highly offensive, and they are suspended for that conversation. In a situation like that, where you're in a work environment, can you actually be suspended or lose your job for just having a conversation with somebody on your break?
Well, it depends on whether it's intentionally disruptive. For example, if you had two guys in the break room talking about some great porno film that they watched, and there was a woman that was very uncomfortable with that conversation, she might take the position that was sexually harassing, or that it may place her in an uncomfortable position in the workplace. On the other hand, two people debating
hunting, and how they dressed a deer, and somebody came by that was an animal rights activist.
Or was a vegan.
Or a vegan. Yeah, of course. You got the vegans.
Right. I mean, my wife and I, we have a friend who grew up in a town in India where there is like no meat in the whole town.
Right.
She's never eaten. She's been a vegetarian her entire life. It's hard to go out to a restaurant with somebody like that and order a steak right next to them. But because makes them uncomfortable.
That's offensive.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, you just know that it makes
it would be offensive to me that if I couldn't order a steak because a vegan was sitting next to me.
No, that I couldn't, but it would make them feel uncomfortable. But that isn't the sort of thing in the workplace that would rise to that level. But if you were talking about speech that, say, was, let's say, white supremacist or anti-Semitic, and you had somebody that was Jewish or African American or Hispanic there, and they were uncomfortable by that in the workplace, that would clearly be unprotected speech.
All right, Jeff Stulberg is here. StulbergLaw.com. It's Jeff and Jeremy. KZOZ.com is how you can always follow us on live.
It falls under the guise of, because it seems like for whatever reason, because it was so prevalent maybe in the 80s and the 90s, that there are pretty and it's so focused upon in the workplace. There are definers for sexual harassment, so you pretty much understand sexual harassment, and companies make sure their employees understand sexual harassment, but maybe not orientation or religious or even patriotic, how people feel about that. Those lines are probably a little bit more blurry.
Sure, and that's why larger employers tend to have meetings with employees periodically to sort of get these issues out in the open and say, we want everybody to feel comfortable at work. We want people to feel free to be themselves here, as long as that doesn't impinge on somebody else feeling free to be themselves. One example of clearly unprotected speech in the workplace would be if you were standing at the water cooler dissing top management of the company to everybody that walked by. That would clearly be activity in the workplace inconsistent with the ongoing smooth operation of the business. That would clearly be something that would be subject to discipline or whatever. On the other hand, if you were talking to coworkers about the fact that the employer does not accord the mandatory required 10-minute rest periods halfway through the first part of the day and halfway through the second part of the day after the midday meal period, and you were trying to inquire as to whether other people were not getting those same breaks as well too, and you were terminated or sanctioned for that, that could clearly be protected communication or protected activity, and could be a problem for the employer.
Yeah, if you feel like you have questions about employment policies and things like that, you should call Jeff. 544-7693. In the meantime, you should just watch The Office and just do the opposite of everything they do.
Yeah, you know what? That would be as a matter of fact, I have a friend that does seminars for large employers,
right?
And he shows quips from The Office as done up on the screen, and he's got a bunch of them, and
that's a seminar I'd like to sit through.
And then also he has from things about cultural sensitivity and things. He has old clips from Archie Bunker from all of them.
Sure.
And throws them in. This is like a don't.
Yeah. Good to see you, Jeff.
Yeah, likewise. See you next week.
Sounds like your summation to your wife was correct, and NFL players can't be fined or fired even.
It can't be a rule. The president can't make a rule that you have to stand
for the national anthem.
I mean, that is what our country is based on, right? Is our freedom to express ourselves. I mean, that's the one thing we have. It's not like they're doing it naked, where it could be offensive to somebody. They're just, I know it's offending people, but that's okay because you can do that. Not everybody agrees with people that protest, but they have a right to do that. And whether you agree with it or you don't agree with it, I hope you agree the fact that you should be able to do it, because that's literally what this country stands on. Anyways, we got a guy here that wanted to say something.
Hey, man, I just have a little opinion that I have to express about this whole kneeling and staying in a locker room for the national anthem or for the flag or whatever.
Sure.
How many people at home tonight that are going to watch this NFL game between the Bears and the Packers, how many of them are going to be standing in their living room for the national anthem and for the flag?
I can only answer for myself, and I'm going to say I am going to only because my daughter makes me stand.
She's like 4.
She's 4, and whenever the national anthem comes on, I don't know if she's like following the lead of everybody else, but she's like, Dad, Dad, Dad. I'm like, oh yeah. And I have to stop everything I'm doing. I have to go stand at the TV and look at the TV. That's 2 minutes long, and I'm like, God, I was in the middle of something here.
There's your education system already at work in preschool. But no, I mean,
I understand what you're saying.
But who does that? I mean, nobody stands in their living room and watches the national anthem.
Exactly. But I bet you all hell break loose if somebody kneels at a live football game or a live baseball game. What if I decided to go to the bathroom instead of stand for the national anthem? I said, I'm going to go to the restroom. Oh, I might get my ass kicked in there, right?
Possibly.
I've been in the bathroom when the national anthem starts, and I just put my hand over my heart and keep the other hand controlling.
But now it's such a hot button topic that the bathrooms, you're going to be closed out of the bathroom.
Yeah, I know. Well, thanks.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. I mean, I think it's ridiculous. And Jeff, you and I were talking the other day, and you're like, you know what this makes me feel like? Do you remember when you said this? You're like, I feel like if I stand up and put my hand over my heart, I'm a racist now.
I know.
At least that's how people are going to see me, because if I don't kneel, then I'm a racist. That's where this whole thing has gotten out of control.
The whole topic is divided the country, which is the antithesis of what it is about. It is supposed to unite the country.
And now I feel like it's changed, and it's not really about even what it was about in the beginning. It's now just about being against the president or being a racist.
Or I was thinking about minorities now. Like, what if you're a minority that likes to stand for the national anthem, but you stand for the national anthem, and now it's seen as this race divide? That's what's terrible about this whole argument, is that the national anthem has become a race divide now. And it's really hard for me to wrap my head around, and it's the fault of the one person that made it the straw that stirred the drink, essentially, on this one. And it's the president, who's not supposed to do that. He's not supposed to divide the country. That is not the job of the president, is to divide the country. And I don't know if it was his intentions to divide the country, but he effectively did divide the country. And now, for whatever reason, the national anthem is a race topic, and it pisses me off.
We're talking about patriotism a little bit.
Everybody's been talking about all week. Still talking. I thought by Thursday. I was hoping, I should say, by Thursday.
Sorry, I brought it up with Jeff because I wanted to know from a legal standpoint.
No, I think that's a very important information to know about, the employment laws. But these guys, there's one area I wish we would have talked about a little bit closer. It was something that some people had called up and pointed out either on Facebook or they'd called up on the lines at 543-3693 and pointed out throughout the course of the week when we every time we've had this discussion is the fact that the Department of Defense actually spent a lot of promotional dollars on a campaign with the NFL that got the players standing out for the national anthem in the first place back in 2009 with their Salute to Service campaign. Jeff was talking about being detrimental to the business operations. I don't know what the plan is for Salute to Service 2018, but that's going to be very awkward come November if there is a Salute to Service 2018 and guys aren't standing for the national anthem. That becomes detrimental to the movement of the business model, right?
It's funny because Jerry, Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones. He took a knee and then he stood up for the national anthem, and he said that all of his players will be standing for the national anthem this week. I don't know if Trump got to him or if it's just a decision they all decided together.
Well, and that's another interesting dynamic about this whole discussion is you're talking about 32 teams in very different parts of the country. In San Francisco, people don't really care. I mean, let's face it. I mean, some people do care, but
why don't they care in San Francisco?
What I'm saying is,
what kind of stereotype?
There are places that, like NASCAR. Very smart PR move for NASCAR this week to say that the owners, the crew owners, their
teams will be standing.
Their teams would be standing, and anybody would be fired because NASCAR's bread and butter is in the South, where patriotism tends to ring a little truer than it does out here on the West and in the Northwest and the Northeast. It is
true. Like, where we live, we don't see this racism. I don't see it. But I know in other parts of the country, people do see it. Let's grab a couple of calls because people wanted to say something. Go ahead, man. You're on the air.
I'd just like to say that I always stand for the anthem. If it comes on and I'm at home and the whole damn family does,
right.
We actually crank it up and enjoy it.
Turn it on. Put it on the Sonos.
Oh, thanks for sharing.
Volume 12.
Hi, good morning. Go ahead.
Let the people speak. If they don't feel right about what the Steelers did, don't go to the games anymore.
You know what's funny about this whole discussion is, do you think that the owners that decided not to hire Colin Kaepernick, all the owners in the NFL, they're like kind of breathing a sigh of relief now because obviously you can't, and we just talked to Jeff about it, you can't fire your whole workforce for speaking their mind. And there was a lot of people that were saying that Colin Kaepernick was being blackballed because of his stance, and he was not being hired because I was one of those people. I thought he was being blackballed because of his stance for the national anthem. And
I don't think it was his stance.
Teams did not want that distraction.
That's what I think it was.
Now every team has this distraction. So either he gets a job and he was being blackballed, or it really had everything to do with his lack of talent.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what you're saying, but I don't think the actually owners said I don't agree with his political, decision. I think what the owners said was, I don't want to have this distraction with my team. I don't think it mattered to them whether they agreed or disagreed with him. It was just what a rat race circus it became, and what a distraction it would bring to the entire organization.
The same reason why when Ray Rice was reinstated to the National Football League, he got no interest whatsoever because there was a video of him hitting his fiance in an elevator in a casino in Atlantic City. Nobody wanted to deal with that distraction on their team, even though he may have been still a talented running back. We're not going to go there. That's a bad PR move.
How long does this last for? Is this over in a week or two?
No.
Really?
No.
You don't think so?
No.
We don't move on, something else doesn't happen, and then this is just something we talked about back in the end of September?
No.
You think this is still being talked about in November?
I think it will last through the end of this season. And then we'll reset and see where we are next season. I think the NFL.
I hate it. It's such a distraction. I hate it.
It is. I love
football.
I think the NFL will instill a policy in the offseason that will say, forget it. We're not doing anything with national anthems anymore. Teams are going to go back to pre-2009 before we were getting paid by the Department of Defense to go out there and stand for the national anthem. We're going to go back to that. And you guys are all staying in the locker room, and it's not going to be an issue anymore.
Jeff and Jeremy in the morning. 93.3 KZOZ rocks.